Hey, Dr. Judith Orloff. I am so pleased to have the opportunity to talk to you today. And as I was preparing for this conversation, I remembered that, I don't know, 10, 15 more years ago, I had the opportunity to interview you around your work in one of your earlier books and over your time as a writer, as a healer, as a physician, as somebody who is, a very out of the closet empath. Your work has touched people around the globe in so many profound ways. And as we were even signing on to meet in this portal of time and space, I was reflecting on the importance of self-empathy when every single piece of my technology that I had troubleshooted earlier was not cooperating with me. And it's that reminder that in stressful times in life, we need to apply these practices to ourself. And here we are today in the midst of an eclipse portal, in the midst of a portal in time. Your latest book, The Genius of Empathy, is releasing on the new moon, April 9th, 2024. And you have a copy of the book that you can show us for a moment and
I
just,
do. This is the copy, and there's a foreword by His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, which is such an honor. But this is what the book looks like. It's turquoise and white.
which feel like such, just kind of in a sense, such healing colors, such opening colors. And His Holiness the Dalai Lama contributing and giving his, approval and endorsement for, this conversation around empathy at this time that we live in right now feels so important. And it just felt so touching to see his comments on this work. And I wondered if you had anything to say about that, to say about kind of beginning from this place with his words and his forward.
Oh, it was such an honor. He's always been a hero of mine, and I believe in role models for empathy. And he wrote the foreword. I'll just read a few sentences from it. Um, Today, there are 8 billion of us human beings, and we all have to live together. So a sense of the oneness of humanity is more necessary than ever before. Cultivating a sense of our common humanity is a way of creating empathy, which can be the basis for creating a happier, more peaceful world.
And I think right now in the world today, we need a happier, more peaceful world. And we need to remember that each one of us has the opportunity and the potential to contribute to that. And one of the things that struck me when reading the book is you talked about why you have written this book. And one of the things that you mentioned around why was hope, right? And there was a beautiful sentiment that you shared of one of your overriding reasons for writing this book was hope, right? Was having this sense of hope and being able to share this sense of hope. And I wonder if you would speak to that a little bit, to the importance of hope, especially when times it may be elusive for us to find. So what was that about for you in writing this book in terms of your own sense of hope and how you wanted to share that with others?
Well, I wanted to write the book because empathy will give us hope. It can
Mm,
only give us hope. If you cultivate self-empathy, which is one of the chapters, as you had mentioned, or learning how to apply empathy towards your relationships, so you're not fighting and polarizing and arguing and needing to be right all the time. If we apply it to our neighbors and our world, there is only hope.
mhm.
This thing that we call empathy, for me, it's the medicine the world needs, and we need to start over again with it, in a sense. As I opened up the book with a quote by Rumi, um, out beyond any ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I will meet you there. And that's what this book is about. This book is about the field. and how we can come together regardless of, I believe this, I believe that, but come together in the field and start over again. And that's what this book is. It's my attempt to start over again and incorporate this into ourselves and our communities, our families, our friends, our animals, everything. Incorporate it and make it a priority. Every day is an empathy practice for me. And I talk about in the book, empathy is a healing energy. It's not just an abstract thought. It's not just a nice thought. I feel so sorry you have to go through this. And it's not just that. It's an attunement with other people if you're interested in going deep. It's an attunement so you can feel what's going on. At the same time, I teach how to set boundaries and not absorb what's going on in the other people. So that's a skill that needs to go hand in hand with empathy. You can't just have empathy 100% of the time. You have to have empathy and set a boundary with it.
Well, and you spoke to something that I wanted to touch on that you talk about a lot throughout the book, and that's this idea of empathy as skill. Because some people sometimes think, oh, you're an empath or you're not, or you're an empath and it's a negative thing and you're too sensitive, or I don't know how to be empathetic, or I don't want to be faking it. So this idea of empathy as a skill and the genius of this skill, I think, is something that you articulate very well. And along with this skill, you also have a section where you talk about some of the misperceptions that people have of empathy. And I feel like those things go hand in hand, because sometimes one of the misperceptions is maybe seeing the negative aspect of empathy or not seeing it as a skill. You're either born with it or you're not. So I wonder if you could speak to this idea of, first, what are some of the misconceptions that you really wanted to kind of debunk or clarify? And then something about what is it to cultivate empathy as a skill? So maybe
Yeah.
this idea of misconceptions and your emphasis on that and why.
Yes, I mean, empathy, that's the whole point of this book. It's practical skills to heal yourself, your relationships, and the world. And I'm really into practical skills as an empath. It's really important to me that these skills work, because if they don't work, I'm going to be exhausted or in some kind of, tired state. So everyone can learn, and you could start over again today. Let's say you've had a hard time with empathy because you haven't learned how to set boundaries with it. So you just get run over by it and you're tired and you're a martyr. And that's not what healthy empathy is. There's healthy empathy, and then there's just empathy without boundaries. But empathy doesn't mean you're on call for your friends 24 hours a day. It doesn't mean that you have to be empathic all the time. It doesn't mean that sometimes you're not going to be tired. You're going to have endless energy to give empathy to people. The truth is, we're human, and we have to listen to our body's energy. And when we're tired, we need to rest. And that might mean that you can't be empathic towards somebody who needs it at that point. That happens to me fairly frequently after I give a talk, because I really give a lot and I answer a lot of questions, but there comes a time when I get tired and I need to go home, and I need to not answer any more questions. And there's, lots of questions. And I wish I could answer them, but I can't. And that's what I tell people, is that I'm sorry, I wish I could, but I'm just too tired. I've got to take my alone time now. And are they disappointed? Sure. But we have to learn as mature human beings, and empaths, we will disappoint people sometimes. We have to say no sometimes. That's part of empathy, is having empathy for yourself, listening intuitively to what your body needs. And that doesn't mean putting everyone else's needs above yours. There's a section in the book on codependent giving versus healthy giving, which is very important to be discerning about. As codependent giving is when you focus everything on other people and not so much on yourself, and the balance is off. Healthy giving is when you give when you can, and then you take care of yourself as well. So it's both.
And I think that's such an important piece of that misconception too, is that it's not all or nothing. And what you just mentioned in this important of using discernment and discerning also speaks to me about the second part of my question around skill. What is it to build a greater skill set surrounding empathy and our own relationship with it? And this is something I feel you emphasize, particularly in the book, where there's practical exercises, there's quizzes, and there's these conversations around boundaries.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, and you mentioned something just in terms of your own life, in terms of being out in the world. And in terms of these boundaries, what do you find is a practice that you either do yourself that's very helpful for setting these boundaries and or that you suggest to others?
Well, for me, the quiet time is what replenishes me. And so before an event, excuse me, and after an event, I have quiet time. I can't have too much stimulation coming in because it's very exciting to teach. It's very exciting. And it's comes from my heart, but I get overstimulated. And so I need to bring it down so that I could come back to my quiet, centered self. And so I make it a practice, to meditate before a talk and after. But the same, let's say you have a meeting that you need to meditate, to center yourself before you go in the meeting, so your mind isn't going crazy and you're not anxious, and you're able to center yourself. And then also after, to recoup. Maybe the meeting went well and you could celebrate that, inside, but maybe it was hard. Maybe it didn't go as you had hoped. And so you say, I did the best I can. Empathy is, you did the best you can. That was a really hard meeting. No, you did good, made the most of it, and wonderful. So it's the way one talks to oneself and the energy that one gives to oneself, because I make the distinction, the mind and the heart. The mind doesn't really want to have empathy for anybody, who hurt you. It doesn't see the point, you see, but the heart does. You want to have empathy for, let's say, the suffering this person had gone through that made them a sociopath, psychopath, to treat you so poorly. You don't want to forgive or have empathy for their actions, but you do want to have some kind of empathy for, their wounds. And what that does, and why you want to do that, is that frees you from an attachment to them and the resentment, so that they're not living in your head. And that's a magical outcome of empathy that many people don't know about, because it doesn't make it's counterintuitive in a way, that if you feel empathy for just a little tiny bit of this, you don't have to do the whole person, a little tiny bit of this person, they suddenly begin to float back in the ethers and they're not attached to you, which is what you want.
Well, and you have a section in the book where you talk about forgiveness and this relationship, right, with forgiveness and empathy. And this example that you were just giving makes me think about this as well. This idea of forgiveness as a practical skill, this idea of forgiveness also around boundaries and the role of forgiveness. So if you could even, speak a little bit more about the importance of the role of forgiveness in this skill building around empathy.
Well, empathy and forgiveness are connected, because when you can have empathy for even a tad of the person's suffering, then it's easier to forgive. But I want to make a point that this kind of thing that we're talking about, you have to be ready and you have to be attracted to it. It's not something you do just because I tell you to do it. I think it's a good thing. I don't necessarily think it is good for everybody. But if you feel it's good for you, if you're attracted to empathy for someone, even though your mind is going, no, that's ridiculous, then you do it. But otherwise, empathy is about being attracted to it. If you're not attracted to it and experimenting and trying to free yourself with it, don't do it. Do something else. It's that kind of thing. And so when you can have empathy for the hurt parts of someone, if you feel drawn to do that, um, then as you grow older, you're not going to have all of this heaviness around you. You will have a lightness of spirit. You won't have bitterness here and resentment there. And I was swindled here and I was left here and I experienced this loss here that was so hard to get over. And maybe you don't ever get over it really fully, and that's okay, but you have all these things. So if you bring empathy into all these different situations that we humans go through, we have a lightness of being. And when we age, we're not all heavy and bitter. We're, kind of happy about everything, youthful.
Right. And listening to you with, this conversation and what you talk about in the book, it comes back to discernment and skill building, I feel like.
Yes, total skill building and practice. With my patients, I sometimes ask them to practice with me first. They have to set a boundary, which is very hard for especially new empaths who are sensitive and open, and they're not used to setting boundaries, but they need to. And so I ask them that one of the skill set is learning how to set boundaries with someone who's asking too much of you or something you can't do. And so I'm that person. And sometimes when my patient just begins, it's like they can't even get it out of their throat. They can't even. They're like, and just be gentle with yourself. And then they say, I hear what you're saying, but I'm not really able to do that for you. And once you're able to say that once, it's more easy. It's easier to say it twice. So you can then go into the world and say it. And you have to be able to tolerate, as part of your skill set building. Other people might be disappointed or unhappy, or what do you mean you can't do it? And so you have to be prepared to come back and say, I wish I could. I'm just limited now, can't do it. That's what I mean. And I care about you, and just add that onto it. But I'm sorry, I can't.
Well, and you speak to this in this example and also in the book, the importance of practice. And you've even mentioned that this is something you continue to do in your own life. For
All the
example,
time. Yeah.
meditating before going to an event or a talk, meditating after. And that speaks to the importance of practice. And here, you're an expert in this field, you're a clinician. This is a lifelong practice for you, and you are still literally practicing every day.
Oh, every day. You have to. Life is so amazing in so many ways, but it throws so much at us all the time. And once you think you're done with this one, then this one comes, like, so in order to have the proper attitude and approach yourself with empathy through everything that life brings, the happiness and the challenges, they're both. Then you learn how to take better care of yourself empathically and give yourself what you need in certain circumstances. For instance, I'm very practical in the book where, there's a question, how do you show empathy with someone when you're arguing with them?
Hmm.
Let's say you're having an argument with your spouse, and here you go, you're about to say something you regret, because you're getting, all riled up, and it's human. So at that point, you have to pre-think this out. You don't just do it in the moment. That's why in the book, if you could turn to the page, what to do when you're arguing with somebody. But when you're about to say something that you regret, and you've said it before, and it won't come out well, and yet there's this part of you that just can't seem to help it, at that point, you stop and you take a breath inside yourself, and you take a pause and excuse yourself from the conversation and go to the bathroom or something to regroup. You must take that sacred pause and remove yourself from the situation before you say something that's damaging. Because the thing about damaging statements is that sometimes you can't get them out of your head, and the other person may feel terrible about it. So it's your responsibility to program yourself, if you're getting into it with somebody, to take that break and then come back later, maybe tomorrow, maybe you won't be able to do it today, you're so mad or whatever, or you're not feeling heard. But I just want to give people a guideline for empathic communications. What people want is they want to be seen, they want to be heard, they want to be listened to. All right. And if you can convey that to someone, it will improve the communication so much more and give it a chance to reach compromise. Where if I was giving a talk yesterday at a writers' festival, and a man asked me a question. He says, what happens? I don't like somebody. I work in Washington. I don't like a lot of people, and what do I do when the person has this horrible belief system? And the answer is not about changing the other person. The answer is about how you can shift to at least say, I hear what you're saying and I'm going to take it under advisement. Thank you. And so that's all you have to say. And then you have what I call the namaste effect, where I might not like you, I might not agree with you, but I respect the spirit within you, and I can give that to you, even if I don't like you or agree with you. And what that does is it shifts everything. You can go to your lowest point, or you could bring it up with these little tips that I'm giving you. It will bring the energy up. It'll make you feel better. And the practical skill is to say what I just said and get out of the situation quickly. You don't want to get into a protracted conversation with somebody that you don't want to get into arguing about your points of view. That gets nowhere, to argue about your points of view. If you could ever get to the point of going to that field, I'll meet you there. Then you could come from a different place. But the typical thing that human beings do is argue with each other or feel resentful or angry. And that's not going to work anymore. It just isn't. If you want to save this planet and if you want to change things, we're going to have to do it one by one. We have to be the ones to start it. You start with your relationships. When you start getting caught with your triggers, there's a section in the book on identifying your triggers. And the triggers, if I have a trigger, it's much less, but I have a trigger with being controlled. If I feel like somebody's trying to control me, it just makes me upset, because my mother was very controlling. So I've had to work with that, through my life, and I'm much less. But now if somebody's trying to control me, I'll feel here we go. And I'll just say, thanks for sharing that. I'll think about it. And I won't get into it. You do not, it's part of empathy practice. You do not want to get into it with anybody. You don't want to get into this. You want to get into, I hear you. I'll just give them, I hear you. And I can't tell you how much that will mean to them. And also give them, I think you might be right at times. People love being right. They love it so much. And if you could, I sometimes just get a thrill out of, you have a point. I think you're right. And they go, really? Oh, yeah. And so it changes the whole energy when you're not caught in that dance. So these are tips and tricks to apply empathy to people, and then watch their response. It's really fun. And you'll be proud of yourself. You see, the thing is, we have to choose our values at this point in time. We can't be on the fence with this. We have to know what's important. And to me, empathy, love, boundaries, connection, that's what's important, most important to me. I believe in it, that no matter what happens, no matter how far down we go as a world, this is what's going to lift us up again. So this is where we got to stay true on course. And that's what the genius of empathy is about, is to keep you true on course, so that regardless of what you read, and so many empaths are being taken down by the news because they get absorbed by it. Regardless of all that, you do your empathy work day by day, and you feel the change in yourself. And then when you feel the change, it expands to other people. And it has the potential of saving the world. And I don't mean that in a hyperbole. I really believe that it can.
Oh, I believe you as well. And I think one of the things that I wrote down too that you said in the book, empathy is the antidote to the frantic state of overthinking and chronic worry. So you think about the amplification of that overthinking, that chronic worry, and you talk about the importance of connecting with your heart and then how empathy can be an energy shifter, right? So there's those pieces around how do we shift our own energy? And so many of the examples you gave for me come back to this idea of discernment, that also saying to somebody, I hear you, or anything else, it doesn't mean you have to agree with them. Because I think sometimes, again, a misconception is that empathy is people pleasing or agreeing with everybody all the time. But there's a skill in this that has a sense of freedom and discernment. And you also talk about this freedom from attachment and resentment in the book. And it's something you've talked about in this conversation is, this sense of empathy as also a path of freedom.
It's a healing force. That's what people aren't used to thinking about it as a healing energy. Because when you show empathy to yourself, you're opening up your heart, and the heart is the healing energy. And when you open your heart, it begins to spread across your chest and go throughout your body to where it's needed, and then goes out to the world. And so it's presenting empathy as a healing energy that you do want to connect to for yourself, but you don't want to do it endlessly. You can set limits, you can show empathy part of the time, and then not show it. You don't want to show any more empathy. You've just had it for the day. Let's say you've just, you're tired, and you could just stop. And some days are really hard. Some days, you just, didn't go well. Whatever happened didn't go well. So you stop and you go to sleep. I mean, for me, I go to sleep and meditate, watch a nice movie, and then next morning you start all over again. I'm down on my knees next to my altar saying, may I start over again? Yesterday was really rough, but that's how it goes. Expect that. We all have bad days. I'm not empathic 100% of the time. Everybody, has their own things to deal with, but it's part of the healing process to give yourself a break with this and begin to channel the empathy in your body so that you can heal the mind, as you said, the monkey mind and the chattering mind and the worrying mind and the fearful mind. It can exhaust you, and that's up here, but the heart knows a different reality. You see, the heart is different than the mind. We have two assets. They're both wonderful, and they each have their own role. But the mind is not going to direct you to empathy a lot of the time. It just isn't, because it has good reasons why it doesn't want to show empathy to somebody. It has very good reasons, and they're convincing, but that's not the point. That's what I'm saying in the book. It's not, you don't want to convince yourself not to have empathy. You want to come from your heart and see why you do want to have empathy. But it's kind of like two worlds in a way, though they're connected. Most people are stuck in their mind, and why in the world this person embezzled me? They took all my money. Why would I even want to think about having empathy for something about them? That's what the mind says. And there are all kinds of good reasons not to have empathy, but it won't get you anywhere. It won't get you anywhere good. And so this book is about hope, as you said, and it's about trying your best to find empathy and allowing yourself to receive the healing blessing of empathy. There's one thing, I talk a lot about, or somewhat about, the neuroscience of empathy. And there's this one aspect of it, which is just mind-blowing to me, where if you were to watch somebody perform an act of empathy out in life, and you were just watching it, and it made you feel good to watch that, if I were to draw your blood at that point, what happens is your immunity goes up, your stress hormones go down, and the blood indices start to improve, whatever they are. So simply by watching an empathic act can change what's going on in your bloodstream, which is mind-blowing when you think about it. That's only watching it. Just think if every day we create this in our bodies, and then we create this healthy biology within us, this is one way to do it.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful to remember. And with so much of what you just said, and also in the book, it comes back to this idea of a daily practice. And
Yes,
what you just said, it doesn't have to be the same every day. It doesn't have to be perfect every day. And if we feel like we're faltering one day, that doesn't mean that we can't do it the next day. And I think in terms of healing, we also remember that healing is a day by day practice in terms of
absolutely. If you're
whatever healing means.
Absolutely. If you're going, there's a section on going through a physical challenge or how to be with a loved one when they're suffering, and how to show empathy for yourself and for them. And the way to do that, that's a very common, it's one of the hardest situations I've been faced with, is being with loved ones who are suffering and then perhaps they pass on, or they get better. But it just rips your heart out. It's a very difficult situation. Anyways, but the way to deal with it is certainly 1 second at a time. If you're going through it, you don't think about the future. You have to be in the now. And you have to take time out to show yourself self-empathy and not just be around the ailing person all the time, because you have to find the balance in yourself and go for a walk somewhere, eat an orange, take a nap, whatever you like to do, but you can't just stay there 24/7. That won't be healthy for you. And so you need to take a little break and be very kind to yourself with what you're experiencing, because sometimes people feel that when you have a loved one who's sick, you just give all to them all the time until they, get better. And I don't think that's the way to do it. I really, if you want to find balance in yourself so you don't get sick yourself, you want to be in good shape for them. And you don't want to be looking at them with eyes of fear and worry and agitation, or trying to do too much for them. Yes, codependent givers can be hyper vigilant.
Mm.
And can I move the pillow here? Are you feeling better? Are you feeling better? So it's just not the proper way to approach it. But with empathy, you can sit there and hold space for someone and open up your heart and just sit beside your loved one and smile. Heart open, smiling. You don't have to say much. And that's so much better for them than all your worry.
Right. And I feel like that speaks to that concept of healthy giving that you emphasize in the book and in your teachings. That
Yes,
giving doesn't have to be all or nothing.
it's not, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. And the quality of what you give is often more important than the quantity. If you give somebody some high energy listening time, there's a chapter on empathic listening. If I listen to you and I sit, listen to you for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, not say much, but hold the space for you and connect to you, that could help you in your path to move along more than me talking. So
Right.
it's a holding space for people rather than interjecting, oh, that happened to me too. You don't want to do that. When somebody is sharing and you're holding space, you don't want to add, oh, I went through that and it was so much worse. That's what people do. That's the big mistake. So you don't want to do that. You don't want to bring yourself into it. And people have said to me, but I want to relate. I want to just show them that I'm going through this. That's why I do it. And I understand the intentions might be good, but the result isn't. This is their time. It's, I call this chapter the high art of empathic listening, as I consider listening a high art, how we listen to one another. It's powerful. You don't want to be too intense with someone, but you want to, it's the fine balance. That's why I'm bringing it all up. You have to find your way, and I've worked with so many people and finding their own unique way of doing this. But sometimes people think in empaths that they need to overgive, that they need to really amp it up. And what I found is, less is more.
Mhm.
If you can be centered and come from your heart, not your head thinking, and you're giving off this very positive energy. That's what they need.
Mhm. In terms of this, lifelong work that you've done, what is something that has surprised you about either what you've discovered about empathy or in your work with people surrounding empathy?
Oh, this one story comes to mind about a patient I wrote about. She had a very abusive mother, who was an alcoholic all her life, abusive alcoholic, and she was getting elderly, and she got Alzheimer's. And as a result of the cognitive decline, she forgot to drink. And
Mm.
so, when she went through detox, and she never picked up another drink again, and this woman got the mother she always wanted. This was a lovely mother, and they were able to be together for a year and have a good relationship. And that to me is a miracle. It's the way life has of rearranging certain things. Who ever heard of that? She forgot to drink, so she's not an alcoholic anymore, so she could be a good mother. But she didn't even remember she didn't drink, which was great. So miracles can happen. Strangest things, the most wondrous things can happen on your path that you never even thought was possible. And it just makes me smile to see the miracles that empathy can bring, because it will bring you unsuspected gains. It really will. This is something that, you start becoming proud of yourself and who you are. And when somebody comes down on you for being empathic, or how could you be too sensitive, which is what people always say to empaths. No, this is not based on any kind of truth. This is just misconception. And you don't want to even respond so much to it. Just to say, I'm really liking who I am. Thanks for sharing. But you don't want to get into it with people. And that's a big lesson in empathy. If you can have discernment, to take loving discernment one step back from someone rather than jumping in their skin with them, and hold that space that's a little more distant, so you don't absorb what's going on with them. That's not being more empathic. It doesn't serve a purpose for you to absorb it. It's just one more miserable person. It just adds to the list. But you do want to hold the space and help certain people. And friends. Sometimes you may want to help friends, or help yourself. Every day, help yourself in whatever way you can, because this is precious. This body we're given, this ability to have empathy. This is a great gift. It's a powerful healing tool that you can ease into. Just ease into it. And I wanted to read like a couple paragraphs from the end. Could I do that?
Yes, yes, and that actually segues us into what I wanted to kind of make sure we covered is what you hope people gain from reading the book and kind of passing that on. But I'd love for you to read something from it, because I think that takes us into this holding the space for oneself, holding the space for this healing work, holding the space for this hope. Yeah, please.
Okay. All right. Well, this is in the last chapter. If we know who we are and can remind each other of this, we remain stronger together. You are an angel. You are a scoundrel. You are a gorgeously imperfect human with a perfect soul. You can know this with empathy. Don't ever forget its importance and loving power. This is such a simple secret, but hidden from many people. May this book inspire you to think about empathy from new points of view, and to see yourself and others from the most tender perspective. I presented a range of tools to access empathy in many circumstances. Find which ones most appeal to you. Use them every day. Humans are often difficult to deal with, but we are wild and beautiful, and we can grow fast into our brightness if we allow ourselves to. Take good care of yourself and each other. Try not to make things too complicated. Ultimately, it all really comes down to love.
Hearing that, I feel like that's what you would like readers to experience, is to remember that it all comes down to love, and to remember that these are practices to do, every day, and that this is, even in moments maybe of despair, that practice of self-empathy is also so healing.
Absolutely. And for all the animal lovers out there who have animal companions, look at the way they look at you. That's how you want to look at yourself.
Is there anything else you would like to end on, that you would like readers to remember, that you hope that people um, benefit from buying this book? And I hope everybody watching this buys the book, buys it for their friends, tells their friends to buy the book, and can be part of this healing energy, and can be part of this moving into the space of the heart with clarity and with boundaries.
Yes. And to, start today by
Mhm.
being empathic with yourself about one thing, whatever it may be, instead of beating yourself up, which is the habit of many people. Just have one thing where you're empathic. No, I'm going to take a little rest today. I'm going to take a little nap, or I'm going to meditate on the eclipse and just feel that energy for a little bit longer time, if that's what you want to do, or I'm going to go out and be by the water and allow myself the time to take it in. These are all empathic acts for you. It's to feed you, and to know that you can do this every day rather than beating yourself up, as the beating is a very common pattern. And I have a spiritual teacher who's a Taoist, and he says, when we beat ourselves up a little bit less each day, that's spiritual progress.
What a great affirmation for people, right? If you beat yourself up a little bit less each day. And I feel like your book offers a set of very practical and easy to use tools. Like, you have 4 steps to practice self-empathy. And one of those is to speak to yourself with kindness. So may we all speak to ourselves with more kindness.
Yes, yes, yes.
And yeah, and your words, your book, I feel like this is a book that is healing, that is life changing, that is accessible.
Thank you, Felicia. The beautiful, beautiful opportunity to be in dialogue with you and to have your input and sharing about empathy and the love that you give off as you sit there. I'm very aware of it and I appreciate it. And it's the way I like to be with people.
Yeah, and I think the way we can be with each other, and I feel like you are such a model for these teachings. You talked at the beginning of our conversation about the importance of role models, and I feel that you, in the work that you do in the world, in all the ways you show up, you are a role model for us all. So thank you.
Thank you. And I just want to invite people, on April 13th, I'm having a book signing and talk and empathy discussion at the Mystic Journeys on Main Street in Santa Monica at 1 p.m. on Saturday, the 13th. So everyone who'd like to join into the discussion and come and meet me, and it's outdoors in a garden. And so there's lots of ventilation and it's a beautiful, beautiful place. So April 13th, come join me.
Great, and I'll add some links to this conversation, so that you can buy a book, so that you can join Dr. Orloff on April 13th at Mystic Journey, a really beautiful location, an opportunity to connect in person, and may we all practice more kindness, empathy, boundaries, and skill with ourselves and each other. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.